Great to have you on the show today. My name is Amobola Stephen, and welcome to Live Well Lived by Amobola Stephen. Now, if you want to catch up with any of my missed episodes, simply go online and search for Live Well Lived by Amobola Stephen on any podcast distribution platforms. Perhaps you can hook up with me on all my social media handles on LinkedIn at Amobola Stephen, on my Facebook page, Blue Buttons Communications Network, on my Instagram page, Mobola_X, perhaps on my Twitter handle, Amobola Eliza. Now, on today's show, I have Purdeep Sangha, who is an entrepreneur and internationally acclaimed personal coach and advisor to businessmen. Welcome with me on Live Well Lived by Amobola Stephen, Purdeep Sangha.
Hey, thanks, Immobile, for having me on your show.
All right, it's a pleasure. So, first, who is Purdeep?
Sorry?
First, who is Purdeep? I want to meet you.
Oh, who is Purdeep? Yeah, oh, that's a really good question. So I consider myself just to be another guy. So I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a guy that loves to live a passionate life. If I don't have passion, I just don't feel aligned with myself. And I'm just someone that likes to push myself past my limits every single day. And by doing that throughout my life, I've learned that there's certain tricks and systems that people can put in place to perform better, achieve their goals, and ultimately just live a more fulfilling life. So my life is really dedicated around helping other people. I've been coaching people since I was 17 years old. I was managing employees since I was 16, and so this has been a big part of my life. And every time I try to go a different way, you can say, whether it's in business or some other aspect, I keep getting pulled into this direction. So I finally submitted and said, you know what, this is my true purpose and passion. So that's in a nutshell who I am.
Oh, great. And thank you for finding your true purpose in life. Right now, you strongly focus on the development of men in business, right, and personal leadership roles. I want to know what's the inspiration behind this?
Wow, there's a lot of inspiration. I guess the biggest inspiration for me is my father and my grandfather. My grandfather was a very inspirational man, taught me a lot. He taught me what it meant to be a man, along with my father. My grandfather immigrated from India after my father did. But I'll start with my grandfather. He was basically a military man. He was in the British Indian Army back then for decades until he immigrated over. And he was a very religious and a spiritual man as well. So he was one of the most interesting men I knew. He balanced the world of war with religion and spirituality. And he taught me these aspects, but he also taught me, more importantly, what it meant to be a man, to live by values, to live by principles. You know, your word is your bond. These are things that were ingrained in me when I was younger. And then seeing my dad, who was a very, you can say, a big figure in our life, a very big statured man as well. He would come into the room. He had a turban as well. Uh, and and he would come in. We'd be like, okay, you know, as kids, we felt safe because he was the man of the house. And and so he taught us the balance of being a man, but also being emotional as well, being able to just just express your emotions, because he was a
That's
very
right.
emotional man, a very loving man. But he also struggled with alcoholism, which was a very tough thing. And so when my grandfather went off to war, he left my father and his siblings in the care of his brother, who was an alcoholic. And
Hmm.
so my father just ended up drinking at a very young age. And he struggled with this his entire life. And he just never got past it. And unfortunately, what had ended up happening was he, as a result, his diabetes. So he had diabetes, started to get heart disease. And my dad was the hardest working man I knew. And his goal was always to hit 65 years old. That was his milestone, because he came to Canada with literally $11 in his pocket, built a successful business, raised a successful family, helped so many people in his life. And 65 was going to be his milestone to tell himself that he did it and pat himself on the shoulders. But unfortunately, he died from a sudden heart attack at 64 and a half. And that was a big blow to our family, obviously, to lose our father and a figure like that. But it was also it was like a sign from him, because it was like a sign from him saying, son, keep going, because there's a lot of guys that need the help. And the work that I do, 8 out of 10 guys are living that same life. They're working, they're hustling, they're grinding, they're trying to get
That's
to some
right.
place, and waiting for a certain milestone to be fulfilled with their life. And it's a big challenge in today's society. So that's why I really do what I do, is because there's a lot of resources for women, very few for men. And on top of that, there is such a lack of leadership, where we need to bring the leadership back into men, what it really means to be a man that lives with values, with principles. Your word is your bond, standing for a greater purpose, but also relieving that tension between men and women right now, because there is almost it is a power struggle. We're seeing it in the corporate world. We're
Absolutely.
seeing this now trickle into families. Well, who wears the
Hmm.
pants in the family? Who's all of this is not doing any good for the next generation of kids.
That's right.
So for me, the ultimate reason why I do this is so we can raise a more mindful society and get back into a world that is where people are helping each other rather than actually hurting each other.
Oh, great. Thank you for that introduction. Nice one. Now, what defines a family man?
Oh, well, a family man is a man that, well, here's my definition of it personally, is a man that obviously has a family, but also is considerate and mindful of what it means to be the leader of his family. That is the most important thing. How do you lead your family? What is your role? What's your expectations? How do you protect your family? How do you teach your family? How are you there to understand your family, raise healthy and happy kids, but also putting your family as a priority
Hmm.
and having the freedom and the autonomy to be able to spend more time with your family when you need to or want to, because a lot of us men these days identify ourselves more with our jobs, our careers, and our businesses rather than with our families. And that's a tricky slope, because it means that family comes as a second priority. And we know from studies that it's very important that kids be raised in a healthy household, with loving parents that love each other and that are there and present. And these things can become a challenge. I think the biggest thing, if I was to say, that is plaguing men today, which goes into the definition of a family man, is to be present with your family, is to
Hmm.
be there. Because a lot of men are there, but they're just not there in spirit and mind because they're thinking of something else.
Absolutely, you're right. Now, let's talk about balancing priorities, which is just equal to just what you said. Now, how can a man strike a balance, right, between his personal goals and being a family man?
Well, the first thing is to actually have personal goals,
Hmm.
because a lot of men have goals that are related to their business, their career, and their wealth. They don't really have goals when it comes to their relationship. They don't have goals with their partner in their relationship. So if I was to ask, you out there, whoever's listening, to say, do you and your spouse have goals? Or your partner have goals? Do you have couple goals? Most people don't. I think that's very important, as well as goals in the family. And this can become it can be a fun exercise, because when you get the kids involved, it is like vision boarding. You get them involved and say, what do we want our life to be like? You can create a vision board, get them to cut out certain things depending on how big your kids are, what age they are. But this is important. Having goals in your family, in your relationship, is probably the biggest thing that you can do. And the second thing is to understand who you are, because our identity as men is, as I mentioned before, is very much tied to our jobs and our careers. And we have to restructure our identity to say we are fathers and we are husbands as well. We are leaders in our community. Um, and that is important, because I've seen a lot of guys lose their identity when they lose their job or their business.
Hmm.
But when you have an identity that also is tied to being a good father, a good husband, a good leader in your community, whatever that is, even if your job is lost, you are still intact. And so having those goals, having the identity, and then prioritizing based on how you want to live your life. Another thing is that a lot of guys are out there watching what other men are doing. And plus, on top of that, we have society pushing men and women to live a certain way. You have to make X amount of money. You have to have a certain style of a vehicle or a home or whatever that looks like. And so men get caught in that trap. And if you ask a lot of men what they truly want, it's not necessarily all those things. That's not their main priority. They really just want their family to be happy, healthy, and they want to give their family what they believe their family deserves. And a lot of
That's
it
right.
doesn't come to all the fancy stuff. So it's really peeling back all those layers and getting to the foundation and the core of who you are as a man and what really drives you. And when you find that out and reprioritize your life based on that, you'll understand that you'll have all of the other stuff too, the fancy stuff, if you
Hmm.
really want it. But it's the core stuff that you really get to focus on, which then drives the other elements.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for that. Now let's talk about your book, the new The Complete Man. So,
Yeah, it's basically it's just released. The audiobook is just released now too, but it's a compilation basically. It's an overview, it's a guideline, it's a handbook for men to really live a complete life, to have success and have victory, as the subtitle says, right? Achieve ultimate performance, fulfillment, and victory in every area of your life, meaning that you don't have to sacrifice in one area where a lot of men do. They'll
that's
sacrifice their
right.
family life for their career or their business life. And you don't have to do that. And these are real subtle, practical ways to actually do that. So I explain the psychology and the science of how to operate effectively, how to perform better, how to achieve your goals, and also be fulfilled, but also the practical steps to take. Because I wanted men to come out and read this and be like, okay, this is great information, but what do I do? And each chapter has a summary section, which is, okay, here are the steps or the action items that you can actually do to improve based on that particular chapter. So it's in a lot of ways, it's also giving men, I don't like to use the word permission, but it is. It is giving men permission to live the life that they want to live
Mm,
rather than
absolutely.
submit to all those other pressures.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, how can we get that book? Is it
Well,
accessible?
yes, it's simply you can go to Amazon. That's the easiest way, but you can also get a copy through my website at a discount, which is completemanbook.com. And you can also get, that's for the physical book. You can also get the audiobook if you prefer at completemanaudio.com. And if you use the promo code Victory75, all one word, you'll get 75% off the audiobook.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for that. Now, talking about psychology there, how does high performance psychology come into play when it comes to the masculine gender?
How does psychology come into play?
Yeah, high performance psychology, how does it come into play when it comes to the masculine gender?
Well, it's really interesting because it's a blend of psychology and science and biology and evolution, you can say, because we confuse, there's a lot of stuff that came up back in the 60s and 70s when people talked about culture and nurture is what defined a person. Right. And that's when psychology was getting even bigger, where people were saying, well, you can shape a person based on putting them in a certain environment. But we have to understand that we are creatures of biology as well, and there's a combination then. So men operate on different hormones than women do, for example. And so it's important to understand how that impacts our psychology. Here's a simple example that I talk about in the book is testosterone.
Mm,
At times we can have 100 times more testosterone than women, and we also work off of vasopressin, which is another male, you can say,
mm,
hormone. And what that does is it bumps up our aggression, our level of
mm.
aggression. And so when we see men who are being aggressive or acting aggressive or feeling aggressive, more importantly, I shouldn't say acting out aggression, because that's why we have our brain, is to actually, tone down that aggression and see
Mm.
where it's appropriate, but understanding it's not a bad thing. When boys want to play and roughhouse, that's okay, because their testosterone is way more or greater than a young girl at that time.
Absolutely.
So all of these elements impact how men are being perceived or shouldn't be perceived, because now there's this thought that masculinity isn't too much masculinity is a bad thing, and it's not. It's like saying femininity is a bad thing. It's not. Everything is good in proportion to the situation that you present it in.
So,
And this is why it's important when people understand. So the world, there's three worlds that are coming together now. There's a world of science, we'll say neuroscience. There's a world of environment, which talked about which we talk about, but also culture, because culture is a big impact as well in terms of how males behave, how females behave. For example, Western culture versus Eastern culture, there's a big difference there. And
that's right.
understanding the psychology of that is very important.
Right. Now, it's been well lived by Mobile Steve, and here I am with international acclaimed personal coach and advisor to businessman Purdeep Sangha, who's been sharing his professional prowess on the subjects of leadership, the masculine gender, and more to come. Now, what do you want to say about women that are taking up leadership positions, in this era?
Oh, I would say just keep doing it, because I think it's much needed. And I think women have been oppressed for a very long time from this perspective. So understanding that women have a place, a very strong place in leadership roles is very important. I think men and women are understanding this. Here's my recommendation for a lot of women in leadership roles, though, because I see it. I coach executive teams on this, which are made of both men and women, is um, is to use that feminine side of yourself in your leadership. I think that's what differentiates women. When women show up with more masculine energy and try to use that to be more effective, it's not as effective as it could be when you're more in your feminine state. Again, that's all situational. But here's what ends up happening is you end up butting heads, right? And I'm being very honest here because this is psychology. When men come up against women who are very masculine, there's a war, like there's a butting heads. But if there's a woman in leadership that flexes her feminine energy, then a man will actually submit and will be like, okay, I understand this. There is no conflict because a man's natural desire built in him is hierarchy. He's
That's
always
right.
looking to be, how do I be on the top of the food chain?
Mm,
And when you present that challenge to him, he will always take you up on that challenge. And so
mm.
taking it from a different perspective, most effective women that I've worked with and seen in the business world as leaders, for example, are the ones that are more feminine and they don't try to be a man in the role. They're a
Mm.
woman in a leadership role. I think that's very important.
Oh, great. That's very deep. Now, as an advisor to businessmen, what three major questions will you ask the founder and CEO of a business organization who is planning on retiring, in a few months' time?
Who is retiring?
Yes, in a few months' time. Do you have any expert and professional, advice or and questions you need to answer? The person needs to answer.
Well, if from a personal perspective, when I ask is, what are you going to do after you retire? Right. Because that's a big one. We know that when people retire, their level of motivation drops, their health actually drops. So they have to have something that transitions them into the next stage. Um, the second piece is if we're taking a look at the scenario based on my understanding, is a CEO of a corporation where someone else is going to step into their place. I'm assuming. The,
Absolutely.
the next thing I would say is, do you plan to stick around at all? Because I'm a very strong supporter of CEOs when they leave the organization to leave the organization. Because when a CEO leaves, they're leaving for a reason, and it's time for someone new to come on with new ideas.
That's right.
And that's very important. When CEOs stick around, it's still, you don't have those fresh ideas. I think
Mm.
that's the other element. And I think the other question that I ask is, what is the executive team like, and where does the executive team need to evolve? Because a new CEO can come on and they'll have their own thoughts, their own ideas in terms of what the CEO or what the executive team looks like. But I always like to know from the existing CEO what how the executive team is operating, what's going well and what's not going well, because that's a big sign of what's going to happen going
Mm.
forward.
Oh, great. Thank you for that brilliant explanation. Now, let's talk relationship. Right. Now, is it possible to have 100% right reciprocity in terms of love, care, and attention in a relationship?
Is it is it 100% possible?
Yes, to have reciprocity, right, in terms of love, care, and attention in any relationship.
Oh, absolutely. I think it just comes down to how much energy and time and effort you put into a relationship. Again, it has to be a priority. If your relationship is not a priority, it's going to be tough. And I think that's why a lot of relationships fall apart, is because the energy and the effort is not put into it. There's this common myth that, oh, relationships should be easy. You're not supposed to put any time, effort. It's just organic. No, it's actually two people coming together, two totally different people coming from two totally different backgrounds and two totally different brains, trying to create one experience as a couple. And that is very tough. You're basically
That's
creating
right.
a team. And that's how I take a look at it. This might be more of a, you can say, a masculine approach to a relationship, but I look at it as a team. You're working together, and each person should be showing up, and I like to say every day, but that is, I would say that that is challenged because everybody goes through tough times, right? There's people
That's
that
right.
have you. if someone loses a parent, for example, you can't expect your spouse to be 100% in the relationship. It'll take them time to recover. And so the way I take a look at relationships is two people who operate like a pendulum. And if you
Mm,
can see a pendulum, it swings back and forth. And we as human beings, as individuals, have good days and we have bad days. And that pendulum swings back and forth. And when you learn to optimize yourself, you learn to swing in the better zone more often and less in the negative, I'm going to say disempowering zone, less often. So you
that's
learn to
right.
have better days and you
That's
learn how to have less bad days. But
right.
guess what? You have two people that are trying to be in sync with each other, two pendulums that are swinging. And so the more you can try to align yourself in that relationship, the better. But it is never perfect because those pendulums are going back and forth. And that is the big challenge. You might have a couple or a person be in a relationship where you're gung ho, you're happy one day, but your spouse is not. And you're wondering like, why the heck are you not happy? Um, and you might have a bad day and then your spouse is having a great day and she or he is asking that same question. And so it's just trying to be on the same page more often. But to answer your question, it absolutely can happen. It takes intentional work, effort, and
That's
time to
right.
put into it. It's an evolution.
Right. Absolutely. Now, to my last question, I've been really having a worthwhile time with you. Now, do you have any business idea you want to share with my audience, especially in this pandemic era?
Yeah, yeah. I would say my biggest. I keep telling people about this because no one has really jumped into it and hasn't created a big brand around this. But I would say addiction clinics for smartphones and technology. I think we are there already. Society hasn't really admitted, we see articles popping up every once in a while, but society, it's like smoking, right? Smoking was accepted for a while. And then now if you see people smoke or something, you're like, oh, what's wrong with this person? Like, are they, do they want to die early? Not that they're bad or anything like that. It's just, you wonder, do this person even care about their health? Or, a woman drinking while she's pregnant, it's at one point that was acceptable. It's not acceptable anymore.
That's right.
I think we're going to see this trend with smartphones. I think people are going to realize that it's a massive it is a pandemic within a pandemic, because you walk around anywhere, people are just glued to their smartphones, and it's taking them away from the moment. It's taking away from their quality of life.
That's right.
I'll share one study. Is Disney, it did a study in terms of, this is a number of years ago, of what the number one impacting factor on the child's experience in their theme parks. So what was impacting their experience of basically their guests coming in, the kids, and it was their parents' smartphones.
Hmm.
That was the biggest factor for the experience that the kids would have. If you walk in there, and we were there probably a few years ago in Orlando, Florida, parents are walking around with their smartphones all the time, where they should be engaging their kids.
Hmm.
So this is an epidemic. This is a challenge. People will start to say now, I'm a smartphone addict. And
Hmm.
so if you have a clinic or a program or a system to get people unhooked from technology, that I believe is going to be a big money maker in the future.
Oh, great. Looking forward to that. Now, do you have any project you're working on?
Yeah, my biggest project right now is I took a pause because I wrote the book over the last year and was launching the
Hmm.
book, but this year is full force. We are doing a project where we're doing more group coaching for
Hmm.
men. I'm super excited about this program because it's called the Complete Mastery for Businessmen.
Oh,
And it
great.
is basically taking the concepts of the book and making it practical and taking men through it over a course of 12 weeks. So they come in, being, you can say in most cases, feeling incomplete, and they come
Hmm.
out being complete and performing at their best and being fulfilled with their life. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, great. I wish you best of luck in that project.
Thank you so much.
All right. So, any parting word for the audience?
Yeah, I would just say this is a challenging time right now with COVID, but you got to keep moving. You got to keep moving forward, because we will get through this, and we're going to get through this stronger. And I believe that we will end up doing that in 2021 for sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Purdeep Sangha, for coming to Lawali Mobile TV. Now, it's been an amazing time on today's show. Let's do this some other time. I'm sending all my love, and I say, you need to stay safe always. For me to you, it's bye for now.